Let's do a little 3 and 3 and 3. So we can kind of get into the weeds a little bit. Talk about our 3 favorite portal additions that Nebraska's had, 3 high school additions, and then 3 returnees maybe that were the most important for what Nebraska wants to do in 25. Let's start with the portal. Do you want to give me 3, or we can all?
We'll go back and forth.
All right.
So one of the reasons we're doing this is because this is around the time every year you do a Super 6. But what that is quickly becoming is a Transfer 6. Because you got to say that the portal guys are going to have – you don't know. The high school kids are so unknown that, like, what you really need to do is split it up. So that's kind of why I came up with this idea. And you can pick the same guys as I do. I mean, by all means.
We'll see how it goes.
You
what do you got?
You feel free to do that. Well, my number 1 is gonna be Williams Nwaneri.
Okay.
Because he's got 4 years left, and if they develop him to be the player that he has the potential of being, then I think he can be a hell of a football player at Nebraska. I don't think he's going to be Randy Gregory. I don't think that's the correct comp, but I think he can be very, very good. Kind of a like a true 5 technique, a Kayvon Thibodeau, giant guy who can play the run, set the edge, go through his man to the quarterback. I think Randy's not the right comp. I mean, Williams Nwaneri is larger than Randy. Randy was, when he came here, was 235 or whatever it was. So he's my number 1, and it's really important that they get that one right. When you get players like that, they have to pan out because they have all that talent. We'll see how Nebraska does. He's not my number 1.
He's high on my list, but I'll go a different direction then. For this year's team, I'm really interested to see what Marquise Watson-Trent does.
Oh, that's a good one.
Coming over. I mean, we talked earlier about coming out of the portal and, like, the guys kind of are what they are and they've been coached how they've been coached. Well, this is a guy he's just piled up the tackles at Georgia Southern, and I love the kind of the connection to Nebraska that he already had. It was his first start in that upset win that they had in Memorial Stadium, Scott Frost's last game. That was kind of his moment when he realized he could be a good player. And it fills a huge need for Nebraska right away, especially at that middle linebacker spot. Had a chance to talk with him when he committed. Just a grounded guy, too. Immediately you can kind of tell that's someone who's going to be a leader in that position group, maybe within the defense. So somebody who's been on the field, hasn't really missed any time the last 3 years. Productive guy, position of need. Marquise Watson-Trent's high on my list.
Okay. My number 2 guy will be Danke.
Okay.
I think he has the potential to be a 1,000-yard receiver, the 3rd 1,000-yard receiver in Nebraska history. I think he has similar traits to Stanley Morgan and Trey Palmer. He's not as fast as Trey Palmer, but, like, he has similar traits. He's got good hands. He's a fluid runner after the catch. Trey wasn't necessarily that fluid, but Stanley was. And I think Danke's going to come in here and be the number 1 receiver and earn Dylan Raiola's trust immediately.
I'll go number 2, Andrew Marshall.
Good one.
I think coming over from Idaho, he has the chance to be that second corner opposite Sear Wright for Nebraska. But to me, the area that maybe he can make the biggest difference is in the return game. And we saw he brought back both a kickoff and a punt return for touchdowns last year. Anyone who's watching this knows Nebraska's return game has long been anemic. At best, it's been a non-factor in games. At worst, it's been costing them field position. So if he can come in and be dynamic and help flip the field once, if he has 3 big returns in a season, I mean, that could flip a game for Nebraska. So just that ability. He's an older guy. I think Nebraska's had a decent track record of guys coming from the FCS level to come up, or not, just a lower level and coming up and producing. So I think Andrew Marshall's a guy who has a lot of different ways he could affect this team in a really positive way.
My 3rd one, even though I think Elijah Pritchett is probably more important, is going to be Jalen George, the defensive end coming from East Tennessee. I think he's probably going to come in and be a grinder and be a tough guy and a hard worker and kind of a bull rusher. He's smaller. He's 6'2", 235. He'll try to get around guys. He'll try to get under the pads of offensive linemen. And I think at the end of the year, we're going to say, I don't know how many sacks he'll have, but I don't think it'll be 0. I don't think it's going to be 15, but I think it'll be 5.5. And we'll be like, you know what? That guy was pretty dang consistent, and you could count on him. He got you snaps. He was, consistent. I think he reminds me a little bit of a Cam Lenhart, but he's a little quicker. So Jalen George is my third, while again acknowledging that Elijah Pritchett is very important to this team. Mm-hmm. But I just don't know where that's going to land.
Deshaun McCullough would be my third, coming over from Oklahoma. And in part because I think he's a guy who could play rover at Nebraska. And Isaac Gifford moves on. And I think Ramir Stewart was kind of that backup at that position. But he's somebody who is just sort of a Swiss Army knife. He can be that fifth DB. He can play linebacker. He can stuff the run, get after the quarterback. Like, I think they don't have as many of those versatile type players this year maybe as they've had in the last couple. So McCullough comes in, a lot of experience at Oklahoma, another older guy, motivated, comes from a football family. His dad was the running backs coach at Notre Dame this year. So I think McCullough's an interesting one as well. Can I ask you about offensive line? I think that's interesting that would neither of us list Pritchett on there. Is that, like, to me, that's because I think Nebraska's actually okay at the O-line if they didn't bring in Pritchett, and they're after Rocco Spindler, and they've chased a lot of these portal offensive linemen. I guess I've kind of always felt like if they had to go with who they have, that they'd be okay.
We don't know whether Teddy will be ready,
or Corcoran, right? I mean that's part of it. But they brought in a young class of linemen a couple years ago.
They did.
Gunnar Gatula showed out. Like, I just felt like even if Pritchett's a bust, and you hope that's not the case, they're spending a lot of money on him. He has a track record, but that they'd be okay. But maybe clearly Nebraska doesn't believe that because they've brought in a lot of offensive linemen in the last month.
Yeah, I don't know what they know about Prohaska or Corcoran. I think those are two very different things, but two equally concerned. The situation with Corcoran, one day he could just stop having those injuries and he could be really good. Because I think that sometimes those things go away, like foot injuries and things like that. Sometimes they don't. And the Prohaska, it's the same deal with Fedoni. Like, will he be back? Does he want to come back? I think he's on his third ACL or something like that. So that's really tough. So we'll see what he's able to do and what he's not able to do. But yeah, I think offensive line wise, they want Pritchett. And then with the interior line, if you get Spindler, basically what you're able to do is you can either play him at center, you can move Justin Evans to center, and you can basically tell your Sledges and your Gibson Piles and your, I don't know where Grant Bricks played. I guess he played tackle, but you can tell those guys, hey, once all these guys go after this year, it's all yours. Mm-hmm. And Lutovsky will be your right guard. And you'll basically be able to just say, all right, you guys are going to play, but next season when it's in 26, it's all you guys. And you'll have 3 years left, and don't sit in the saddle. Stay with us, all the rest. But I don't know. I think Sledge might win the job anyway. I mean, I've heard good things about him, and again, you got Evans that you can move to center. You can keep him at left guard. If you move him to center, Spindler. If you get Spindler, then you can move Evans. Or you can play Spindler at center. It makes no difference. I think Evans will be good at either position. And then Lutovsky is a giant guard. I mean, he's maybe the largest lineman on the team. And so there may be times when you want a smaller guy that can get out on a screen or something like that. So it all comes down to how many people Donovan Raiola thinks is ready to play. And I think it was Rule said it or somebody did. Maybe it was Holgerson. He's like, Donnie only thinks this many can play. And he's like, well, I trust Donnie. Six, yeah. Mm-hmm. And 2 of them left. Right? Ben Hart and Scott.
Yeah, right.
And Mazuka, actually. 3 of them left. So my hunch is that they feel like they need 2 more to add to the room. And if Tyler Knack comes along, maybe he can be your tackle. He can be your other tackle. Grant Seagren, I know they like him. I think he'll be one of the few walk-ons that stays with the roster. We saw some guys leave here last week. I was surprised by some of the names.
Yeah.
I really was. I was surprised by Baron Liebetrit. It may be that he's just hurt, and they need to move on from it.
Yeah.
And that Dana Holgerson's not going to really need a I formation fullback. Mm-hmm. Could be that too. But I was a little surprised by his departure. Wasn't necessarily surprised by Alex Bullock, but there was another one in there that I was a little surprised by. But some other walk-ons are going to leave too. There's no reason for them to carry 7 quarterbacks or whatever it would be.
Right.
So some of those guys will go.
I'll go first for high school. Cortez Mills, high on my list. Receiver, signing day flip, long-time Oklahoma commit. The Ja'Cory Barney comps are so in your face with that guy.
Yep.
Productive kid out of Florida, has the kind of the swag, the attitude, the athleticism, a little bit more maybe of a hands guy, a high point kind of guy than Barney. But we just saw what a freshman receiver can do in Nebraska's offense if he comes in ready to roll. And this is a guy that Rules talked about. He mentioned him at signing day multiple times as a guy who should expect to come in and contribute right away. That's a position group that's totally turning over, and obviously they reloaded in the transfer portal at that spot. But I just think Mills is a guy who has that ability to find some kind of a niche and be a contributor, certainly early. And then if he plays out his career at Nebraska, that's a guy I think they're going to be happy they had.
My number 1 is Christian Jones, the West Side linebacker. I think he'll be a multi-year starter. Smart, leader, vocal, good player. Did pretty well in the Navy All-American game, I think. I saw good reports. I did not watch the game, but I saw good reports from just his work that week. So Christian Jones, or I think I saw good reports. Yeah. Because he was in that game, and I think another player was too. But I just like Christian Jones' play all season long. So,
just solid,
very solid and athletic and tough and a lot of different things. So, I think he's my number 1.
I'm going to go Tyson Terry as well.
And
maybe not in 2025 because D linemen are going to take some time to bulk up and all. But I just think long term, a guy who's a dynamic wrestler, the way that he is, his size, his attitude, a local kid who you think is more likely to maybe see through his career at Nebraska. Kind of reminds me of Nash Hutmaker a little bit in background and build and attitude and all that. So I think that's a guy too who's going to be a rotational piece for many years at Nebraska. That's going to be a guy who went maybe a little bit under the radar. He committed early, all the rest, but that's going to be someone they're happy they had as well.
I think they put a lot of time and energy into keeping Malcolm Simpson in the program. They had to kind of fend off Texas and maybe other schools. So Malcolm Simpson is my number 2. Interesting player. Played in kind of an odd defense where he's standing up sometimes and playing interior other times. They'll figure out how they want to play him, but he's got a nice body type. I think there's a bunch of different body types that you can be, but one of the body types is 6'3", 250, built, but not too thick. And then there's the Nick Benito, 6'1", 235 for the Broncos, who's just awesome and small. Von Miller's kind of that way too. And then you got the giants, the Chase Youngs, who are huge and talented and all that, and just incredible off the edge. And Simpson's sort of in the middle of that, and I like his build, kind of a classic build, and they will need him as a pass rusher. I think he'll be a good one.
I had Christian Jones as well, but I'm going to go. I'll give you a new name, Jamarian Parker, who we've talked about a lot over the course of the last year.
Needs to be good.
Yeah,
that's the one that needs to hit. They didn't get Connor Booth, we'll see what he's able to do. I think he can be a good back for the program, but Jamarian Parker is the guy they brought in to hit home runs.
Right. And they haven't had a guy like that since Maurice Washington. Yeah, it's been a while. So if he can, and Matt Rule, how many times has Matt Rule talked about that? Like instead of a 7-yard run, make it an 80-yard run. Because you break a tackle and you burst away.
This is the guy.
And his story, as we talked about, is interesting. He sat out a year because of a personal tragedy and maybe went under-recruited. Nebraska's had a whole bunch of commitments since he did, a year or two ago?
So he's gone under the radar. Recruiting services, they do some work when the kids are sophomores, and he didn't play as a sophomore. So they had to, he probably didn't get evaluated that year because he wasn't on the field.
And it's a position where guys can can break out right away. You see freshman running backs every year in college football.
I think he could be. I think he can be really special. My third one, I thought about making it Dawson Merritt because I think that makes sense, right? Because I think he could be a potentially special player, but I don't want to go all defense, so I'll go Isaiah Mosey.
Okay.
A little bit different receiver than Cortez Mills. He's thicker, and he's good after the catch, and I think he will be, an effective physical player. And I don't know if I would use the word running back. I don't think he's going to be that. But I think he can play out of the backfield. In other words, when Holgerson's got two guys in the backfield there and he's moving one guy out, that can be Mosey. He can be a run after the catch guy. But he's also got enough size to where he can play physical outside. Mills will if Mills is literally 165, he'll have to put on some weight probably. And I think Mosey is going to come in sort of ready-made. So maybe you can put him outside and get him some touches out there. But I think he's going to be a good player. He was a really good player in high school.
Yeah,
he was going to Oregon.
That's
Just so we're clear, folks, his dad is now here. He's coming to Nebraska because of his dad.
Yeah, for sure.
Otherwise, he was going to Oregon. Does Oregon recruit players who aren't great? No, they don't. They recruit great receivers. And so Dan Lanning knows Kansas City, and so they wanted Isaiah Mosey. He's coming here because his dad's here. Mm-hmm. And so Nebraska's getting a player in that guy.
They are.
Maybe he's Jalen Noel. Everybody know who he is? Yep. If you watch college football, you do. He goes to Iowa State. Mm-hmm. Nebraska was a final two for Jalen Noel. He picks Iowa State because of Nathan Schilhaas. Maybe Isaiah Mosey is Jalen Noel. And if you're getting that guy, then that's big time.
Yeah, that'd be
maybe
right.
That's what they get.
Let's go, I guess, rapid fire quick for the returners. My first will be Sear Wright.
We're not named Dylan Raiola.
Not named Dylan Raiola,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I'm going to go Sear Wright with the year he had last year. He comes back. He could have gone pro or transferred again. Mm-hmm. He's coming back. That's an important piece to start with in the secondary.
Emmett Johnson, 1,500 yards from scrimmage next year. That's going to be my expectation.
Corey Barney, the only proven playmaker back in that receiving core who was here a year ago. Playmaker. Nebraska hasn't had a lot of those. What does he do in a Holgerson offense? That'll be fun to see.
Cam Lenhart, he's got a job. I mean, he's got a starting job. He'd have to lose it. He is going to have an opportunity to play and play a lot. He has waited his turn behind very seasoned defensive linemen, and now Cam has an opportunity to play 40 or 50 snaps a game and really make his name.
I'm gonna throw Elijah Judy out there too. Kind of an underrated return guy. Wasn't quite a starter last year, but he was someone else who could have moved on. And with all the turnover they have up front, to have a bigger body veteran player, former 4-star, came over from A&M. I just think that's going to be an important piece to that room. And he's a dad too, so there's going to be, you would think, a level of maturity that maybe he can bring to that defense.
Deshaun Singleton.
Yeah.
I think he's returning. He will be very seasoned in the backfield. He is he's a leader. And I think that's, I don't know exactly what the health profile of Javen Wright is. So is he going to be able to play all the time or not? Can he play all the snaps? Can he practice all the time? Deshaun Singleton will be healthy coming back, and I think Singleton will be special. And, of course, just a small shout-out, the offensive line matters.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Evans, who plays center? Whoever the center is. I don't know who it is. Is it going to be Rocco Spindler? Is it going to be Justin Evans? Is it going to be Sam Sledge? But centers matter in college football. They matter in the NFL too, but they really matter in college football. They have to command a lot. And as people know, college football moves faster than the NFL. And so there's just things that college football centers, they got to be ready, man. And so yeah, whoever plays center.
A couple more quick hitters. Huskers in the Senior Bowl this week. Seems like they've been performing pretty well. We've seen Ty Robinson holding his own with some high-end linemen. Nash Helpmaker's been out there. Thomas Fidoni's been fluid. Tommy Hill. What have been your maybe observations watching some of the workouts from these guys looking to catch on in the NFL?
I think it's really neat to see Fidoni makes a Senior Bowl. He has giant hands. And so one of the things that I thought was not taken advantage of here is his red zone ability. You can throw a ball up to that guy, and he can go get it, and that didn't happen very much. when he was here.
Confounding. Yeah.
They chose to use They chose to use him in the red zone by throwing him like a 3-yard pass in the flat. I never really understood it personally, but so I'll be intrigued to see what he can do. Ty Robinson should be either late day 2 or early day 3 pick. He should stick in the NFL, and then Tommy Hill's got all the ability in the world. So nobody questions whether Tommy Hill can do it. It's a health issue. I feel for him because last year he was not healthy, and he tried to go out and help the team, and it didn't work. And that's one of those deals where a player cares, and the coaches, and they finally did. Matt Rule finally stepped in and said, okay, I guess I got to do it.
Yep.
The coaches have to shut the guy down because otherwise he'll go out there and play, and he didn't help them against USC. He made a huge mistake early, and he didn't help them against Illinois. When he got burned early because he couldn't move. And so kudos to Matt Rule for shutting it down so that he could come back to the Senior Bowl and be healthy. But your coach has got to help you out there. I think Hill will be a long-time corner in the NFL. I really do. I think he's going to be a good one.
Last thing for us today, Matt Rule's talking on Saturday morning press conference.
Yeah.
And, I would think if he is allowed, he could talk for a long time about things. It's been a full month since he's spoken publicly since Yankee Stadium after the Pinstripe Bowl. So I'll give you a couple things I'm looking forward to hearing from him. I'm sure you have some thoughts too. The spring format is interesting to me. Nebraska still hasn't set a spring game date, if there will be a spring game. What does that look like in the revenue sharing era when you're down to 105 guys? Do you really want to put those guys at risk? I'm sure he'll have some thoughtful
I hope it's an hour-long practice.
Insights on that. Why
I'd
not?
be fine with that. No, I'm kind of over it.
What's that?
Covering that.
The spring game?
Yeah, a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
They've done it to me. Now Matt Rule's games have been better. The 2 that he's run, I've appreciated more. But we got to the point where, remember, there was a stable for scoring system that nobody understood. That's for right. One of Riley's games.
That's right.
And then Frost, I can't even remember what he did to it. Bo had the one. The last one that was really special was the one with Jack.
Sure.
And that was 2013. Since then, it's almost like they could have said, all right, that moment happened.
Shut it down.
We'll never do better than this.
That's it for me.
And then maybe Scott would get his first one when he came back. But I'm like, after that, you can just say, hey, let's just turn this into a practice. Like, they hit peak spring game with Jack Hoffman. You can't ever replicate that moment again for the people who were there or anybody who'd come after. Then Scott gets his first one, or whatever that was. But then it's like Scott's spring games were not good either. I can't even remember what they did one year where they played I don't know what it was. They played the fifth stringers or something. His first one was good because Adrian played really well and he ran and did the whole thing, but a lot of them were not. And then Riley had one that was just ludicrous.
That's right.
Remember?
That's right.
And Patrick O'Brien, it was so silly. It was the last play of the game. And really all Patrick needed to do was just throw the ball away. And he threw it up because he's trying to make a play. And they made an interception, and that was like the winning score because it was 58-57 or something. And I was like, this is just – maybe I'm misremembering it, but I'm like, yeah.
There was the Harburg throw. He had the winning play.
Rule's first one was long, too. It was like 2.5 hours. I'm like, man, this is getting boring. So I'm fine. I'm fine with whatever they do. I'm fine with the next football game being that Nebraska plays being the game at Arrowhead.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with like the all-time spring game player either being LaTravis Washington, who had that one spring game, or Chris Butler, who had this great spring game back in the 90s and I think ended up becoming a running back at Auburn. Like, he had a career. Or, Bobby Newcomb, his 92-yard run, changing his trajectory of the Nebraska quarterback group. So those are like the 3 moments that I remember. Chris Butler, LaTravis Washington, and Bobby Newcomb's run.
That's good stuff, man.
What do you think he'll talk about? I think special teams coordinator.
Right.
They don't have one yet, but I think by the end of the week they might.
Player updates. Teddy, Turner, guys like that we're talking about. What's that like? We haven't heard his thoughts on some of the transfer ads. Elijah Pritchett among them.
Mm-hmm.
What's their, Spindler's decision will probably be made known by Saturday. So what's their assessment of the O-line, and then what portal needs do they have, or they feel like they have for when the window opens again in April. I mean, they've added some pretty impactful players in the spring window in recent years. Marcus Washington was one. Sear Wright was one last year, where they feel like maybe there's still a spot or two to fill. Got any more?
What'd you think of Dylan in the Kansas City Chiefs locker room?
Hey, good on him, man. He's living his best life. You have him and Terry Braden, the incoming D-line coach, and Dawson Merritt and his dad, Dave, who's on the staff there. It's truly a Red Kingdom sort of crossover thing that they've got going on. I don't know. He's in a good spot. What do you think?
It's great.
You like it? Okay.
I'd say if it were me, just me, I'd say, you know what? Next time you're in an NFL locker room, you're playing on an NFL team.
Oh, okay.
Like, that's what
okay.
Because I think you want to make sure that he understands, like, listen, you want to be in there. Just stay hungry for it. Like, that getting to that play, like where Patrick Mahomes is on a level that literally no quarterback has ever been on, except maybe Brady, but not really. Like, so he's in a stratosphere that we don't even understand. And that game was incredible on Sunday, but he's up here. This is so like, that would be what I would say. Like, stay hungry for it. And maybe I know he's hungry. And maybe sometimes being in that environment makes you hungry to be there.
Yeah.
But, like, starve yourself of that experience, because the next time you're in there, it's you in a preseason game as the first pick in the NFL draft making a throw. And you're playing on a bad team, like he will be. If he's the first pick in the 26th draft or 27 draft, he won't be on a good team. The 27 draft.
Yeah.
He'll probably be on a bad team. And next time, because what's going on in that room, in that locker room, is unprecedented to anything that we've ever seen in professional football. Except maybe the Browns back when they played in the AAFC or whatever it was called. Like, there's just nobody's ever done this. So it can be a unique environment. So, I think Dylan Rose got a big season ahead. In terms of, like, what I think he's going to do, I think he's, it's going to be 3,000, 3,500, 25 touchdowns. He's going to have a great year. I think the leadership component is awfully important, too. This is his team now. This is his team. So there's a moment where I think it shifts from Lil Cuzzo to the face of Nebraska football. So you're no longer this guy. You're Nebraska now. You're Nebraska. It's Matt Rule, and it's you. And you're the leader, the whole thing.
He's the one in the top preseason, way too early, top 25.
Mm-hmm.
It's Nebraska, but it's really
him.
Yeah.
And so, like, that moment comes, and it's like, all right, everything's going to be about this now because this is my team. I'm no longer, this person who walks in the NFL world because of people I know and, my father. Like, oh, no. He's a big deal now. And I think he's actually pretty humble. I think Dylan's more humble than people appreciate. And so, like, I don't know if it's clicked over yet that, like, you're not just a big deal on campus. You are, when you walk to the front of the room in the first meeting or whatever for spring camp, everybody's waiting to hear what you have to say. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't true last year. It will be this year. Mm. Heinrich Harburg is not going to be like, well, what will I say? No. Everybody's going to be, Dylan Raiola, what do you have to say? Who's the defensive leader on this team? Probably Buford, right?
He'd be one of them.
Yeah. Great leader. It's still Dylan's team.
No doubt about it.
So that's what I think. I'm thinking about more like that, not like he shouldn't have been there. I think it's great that he was there, and I think that's awesome. But, like, you are now the defining component of Nebraska football. You don't have to be anybody's, hey, I'm over here with the Chiefs. No, man. You're a big deal now. You know what I mean?
I do.
Does that make sense?
They kind of passed the torch at the Pinstripe Bowl presser afterwards when they said,
like, you're Cam Ward.
you're the
man.
future.
You're Cam Ward. Like, Cam Ward wouldn't be there. Like, you know, you need to think of yourself as a really big deal. Who's like, when I get here, I'm probably going to be playing with the Bears. Or, you know, like, when I get here, I'm probably going to be playing with the Jaguars. That's just going to be the life I'm living, and I'm going to have to do it from the bottom.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Mahomes walked into a dream scenario in Kansas City, and then he made it beyond anybody's dreams. He walked into a perfect situation, and then he made it even better. That's the story of the Chiefs. Like, Mahomes, I'm not saying he got lucky, because he is singular in his greatness, but yeah.
Well, we'll be back next week with a couple big deals. Sam and Tom will be back as well. So, I mean, he's a big
We missed
deal.
Tom this week. I want to hear his basketball thoughts.
Yeah.
He'll have a column tomorrow. He'll have a column on Thursday about Nebraska basketball. Nobody knows more about college basketball, period, than Tom, and so I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks for listening, Husker fans. This is the Pick Six Podcast. We'll be back at you next week.